Welcome to this Photoshop editing guide by Xanax. We're going to be learning some of the basics when editing your characters' photos in Photoshop. So, once you import the picture that you've taken in a GTA into Photoshop, you want to make a backup of that photo immediately. So, we're just going to duplicate the layer like that. And we're going to start off with something very simple, and that's fixing the polygons here that we can see. It's very jagged lines right here around the shoulder of this character on both sides, as you can see, and this can often happen in areas like the butt as well, depending on the animation that your character's in. This is a very quick and easy fix to smooth out the edges, so to speak. So we're just going to call this a different layer. Let's call this Polygon Smoothing. Go head to the filter menu up top here, and then go over to Liquify. With Liquify, it's a pretty simple job. We use the forward warp tool. Shortcut for that is W by default. I'm going to change this brush size to a bit smaller. Essentially, you want to find the right brush size and sort of just push it over until you make it more round than what it already was, to make it a more of a natural curve. Usually, if you find the 2 points, like where the line meets, put your cursor in the middle and just push it forward there. That's how you can smooth out best. And we need to be careful when using the forward warp tool to not disturb the background scene as much, otherwise it can warp it as well and it won't look natural. The lines won't follow, so you just have to be careful how you choose your backgrounds as well. Anyway, so that's done pretty much. So if we take a look at before and after, so this is after, you've got before, after, before, after. It's a subtle change, but it does make a difference, but this will do for our purposes. So next up, usually with GTA characters, the head is a separate piece from the actual body, so often you can find this weird line following around where the neck ends and the torso starts. So there's a very quick fix for that, and that is using the smudge tool right here. Make the brush a little bit bigger. And let's just go over this line, smudge it around like this to hide this line. It looks like a mole, but we're going to get rid of it anyway by smudging through it. And as you can see, the line is mostly gone, but you can still see leftovers after editing. So what you can do is use a bigger brush size. There we go. So if we take a look at the before and after, the line is gone mostly. Let me just go over here where I missed the part. Now if we take another look again, that line is now gone. Alright, so that's that neck done. Now, another thing with GTA characters and custom hairs specifically is these weird hair strands that you can see, floating hair strands that shouldn't really technically be there. So we're going to make another layer again, call it hair strand removal. And we're going to use the smudge tool once again, just smudging the colors around it over the hair that doesn't attach to anything, just to get rid of those annoying little pieces. And this will basically get rid of any artifacts that come with custom hairs. Help disguise it a little bit more, make it look more realistic, obviously, because you don't have floating hair. Sometimes these artifacts can happen depending on what quality you take the picture at, so what your game quality is. Obviously, when you're taking pictures in GTA, you want to use the highest possible settings. Now, you'll come to a certain point where you're going to have a massive hair strand like this one coming down, and it doesn't really attach to anything, so you can fix that really quickly using a brush. Simple brush. Just take the color with Alt and left click, or you can use the eyedropper tool, which is the shortcut I just told you about. So I or Alt and left click. But if you go to your brush, so you go select that color and then just attach it back like this, just paint it in essentially. You can use lower opacity than 100% to just really layer it in. That way it gives it a little bit more, not of a solid color, it gives you that random pattern noise if you use a lower opacity, as you can see that I have used here. Another way around it is to use the sharpen tool. If you use the sharpen tool, you can quickly add some noise back in if it looks a bit too blocky. Using these sort of settings right here, normal mode, strength 50%. So it gets rid of that block color. For example, I just drawn here like this. This compared to that. Now you'll come against issues like this sometimes where it's a bit difficult to remove these hair strands with the smudge tool, so liquefy is your best friend once again. Using the forward warp tool once more. Fix up these edges real quick, pushing them up against one another, back and forth. Alright, so let's take a look at the before and after here. Much better without these random floating hair strands. Not really much to do on the other side here, so I guess we could remove this hair strand from the ear. So we're just going to grab this color from the ear, using the eyedropper tool once again, and just painting over it with a low opacity. And then using the sharpen tool a little bit to give that noise back. Actually lighten up the color here, because it's a bit too orange-ish, using the dodge tool. And then I'm going to smudge the colour in a little bit from this side. Still a bit too orangey in my opinion, so we can add a new layer actually. Grab a colour you want from there. Use the brush tool again, low opacity. Just paint it over like so. And give it some noise once again. I'm going to lighten up the colour before I do that though. Using the dodge tool, lighten that color, sharpen tool once again, give that noise back a little bit. There we go, that looks much better now. So let's merge those two layers together. Right, so if we take a look at that before and after, you see a big difference here. Now if we just hide all the other layers, so this is where we're at right now. And this is where we were before. So these are very subtle changes, obviously, but this gives us a good base to start on, and actually helping this character develop a little bit in terms of looking better. Once we're done with the hair removal, the hair strands removal and touch-ups, we can go to her actual hair and where it starts, more specifically from her skull. As you can see, the hair strands randomly just start up and it looks very jagged here. So what we need to do is really smooth out this area. So let's make a new layer, call it hair. Just hair, it's fine. Doesn't really matter what you call these layers as long as you keep layering your work so you can go back and touch up something else before you continue to the next step. We're going to start off with the brush tool once again, our good friend, and we're going to select the color from here. We're going to add another layer and just paint in this color. If you go over the hair a little bit, it doesn't really matter because we're going to retouch that in a moment anyway with an eraser. This is why we're doing it on a separate layer, but we just want to fill those gaps in. Now obviously if we just leave it at that, it doesn't look good, it doesn't look natural, so we need to go over it with an eraser essentially. So we're going to start with an eraser, pressing the E key on your keyboard and just following the hair strands, removing those excess details. And then remove any blockiness going over your hair. So this is where the skin starts, so we just want to undo that a little bit. So actually paint it a little bit more in. There you go. Make sure to not do this in one long stroke, so like hold it down, because then you can't undo. It's better if you just do a couple of light strokes so you can slowly undo your work if you mess up somewhere. We just want to turn down the opacity of it a little bit. 91% seems alright. So then we're going to go back to the sharpen tool again. Just give it that noise back a little bit, just to make it more blended in, essentially. Don't want to overdo it, because then the colors turn weird if we, for example, just hit that a lot of times with the sharpen tool. Obviously, you overexpose it. So there we go, that's a good start. So we can now join these two layers, merge them rather, call this hair again. We're going to quickly get rid of this one singular dot using the smudge tool, and then using the smudge tool again. We want to use these hair strands and just smudge them in so it follows that natural curve of the hair into the block that we just added for the hair. There we go. So if we take a look at the before and after, you can see a massive difference in the hair. Now, it still doesn't look too natural, and that's because we need to soften this a little bit. So blur can be very handy here, just to like give it that undertone here. Just using that blur all around the edges, smooth out more. And then if we take a look at the before and after, that's a massive difference here. Now we can still keep touching up this hair a little bit using the smudge tool, trying to fix up this rather smooth issue, because as you can see, like the hair is rather sharp, but here is very smooth, so it's kind of a little bit obvious. You can use the sharpen tool to fix that up using a larger brush size probably. And now it blends in very nicely. So if we look at the before and after, there's a massive difference here. So let's remove all of these layers in between and see where we are at right now with the hair. Big differences in the characters, you can see, looking much more natural, much better, cleaner. Next step would be to go over to the skin portion of the character. So as you can see, this character has very rough skin, I'd say. Not acne per se, but it's very dotted and all that stuff, as you can see. There's a very easy way to just fix that, and that's using the smudge tool once again. And the smudge tool is the favorite friend here. Another tool that comes in handy when fixing up these spots on the character is the blur tool. So if we go to the blur tool, you can really blend those colors in together, so you don't have these random streaks of how you use your brush in which direction. So we're going to continue using the smudge tool. The smudge tool is also a very good tool to remove the wrinkles as well, which we can do, and all of these baggy eyes. And then retouching it with the blur tool really helps. So essentially flicking between the two tools, smudge and blur, constantly. And if we just take a look at the difference real quick, you can see the massive difference. Obviously, after you're done with your smoothing, it looks a little bit too fake, as if there's too much makeup, so we can counteract this with adding some noise back into it. What we did was smooth out the skin, the pores, so she's not as porous anymore, as you can see with all of these dots here. But we want to add some natural beauty to it back again. Otherwise it looks too fake, so using the sharpen tool, we can just click it a couple of times around where we smoothed out the skin, and this gives us this like natural noise pattern that we want typically. Alright, so if we take a look at it before and after, you can see a big difference. Still looks fairly natural, just less porous. Once we're done with the skin for the face, at least, you can do the same thing for the body if you wish to do so. I'm just going to focus on the face here. Now, we're going to retouch up the eyes a little bit so they're not as baggy. As you can see, she's got slight eye bags here. So, once again, smudge tool. Just taking the skin from underneath, that's lighter in color, and just very gently going around the edges here. Getting rid of these wrinkles really makes a difference. Makes the character look younger, more alive. But obviously we don't want to remove too much because then it looks fake again. So using the burn tool, we can follow those natural curves. Gonna add not too much back in, but just following these natural curves. We might have overdid it on this side here, so we're gonna fix that up again using the smudge tool once more. So if we take a look now, much better results here. And we're going to touch up this side of the eye as well, because it looks a bit off. So just going to smudge it upwards a little bit. Should be a lot better now. There we go. Alright, so that's that. Now we're going to go around the eyebrows and make them pop out a little bit more, because I accidentally blurred them in a little bit. I'm going to go with the blur tool. So just going to use the smudge tool. And just layer the skin in over the eyebrows a little bit. Don't make them any thinner, just make sure it doesn't have that blurry line all around. Makes it a lot more sharper. Yeah, back to where I was essentially at the start. Alright, so after fixing her skin, we can make another duplicate layer of the skin layer that we were just working on and call it face tune, I guess. Go up to filter, liquify, and we're going to just focus on the face here using the face tool of the liquify filter, this icon here, with the shortcut, which is A. We're going to touch up the face a little bit, make her smile, so you're going to look for this 2 arrow curve, just like drag it upwards slightly. Don't want to overdo it, make sure it doesn't look like a fake smile, but at the same time, you don't want a resting bitch face. Make her nose a tad smaller, skinnier, and we're going to go to the very top of her face, like here, and pull her forehead down a little bit so it's not as big. Her face is a little bit wide, so we're just going to bring it in very slightly, not overdo it once again. Just making sure we keep those natural female curves. If we go to before and after, you can see that the change. Alright, so after doing her face like that, the one key feature that is missing from GTA 5 characters are eyelashes. So this is something that we're going to add by hand. So we're going to start a new layer on top of the face tune layer that we made earlier. We'll go to the brush tool, pressing B, and we're going to choose a black color by pressing these this icon here, the white and the black squares that would just default to the black and white colors, which you can switch with X, but we're going to stick to the black as our primary color, not the secondary color. Turn the brush size down to like the smallest one you can possibly get, and we're going to draw on some fake eyelashes. We want to turn up the smoothing here for the brush a little bit so that when we draw a line, as you can see, it's a lot smoother following the mouse by slightly being behind it, behind where we actually are drawing. So if we see, for example, if we turn up the smoothness, you can see how behind the actual brush this line is. 25% in the smoothing. Make sure you've got the smallest brush size. I'm gonna add some eyelashes in. If you go over, it doesn't matter too much because we can erase that much later. But you just want to layer in those eyelashes a little bit. Now you want to keep a consistent pattern here. But after you add a couple of eyelashes, we can touch them up with the eraser tool. So just go to your eraser, pressing E, and just make sure they're roughly the same length. So just removing or cutting off the bits that we added that were a bit too long, following the curvature of the eye or the eyebrow, where the socket ends and the eyebrow starts essentially. And then we can do the same for the bottom eyelashes. So most humans don't really have too many eyelashes right around this area, so we're just going to start them off real tiny around where the iris starts here. And there we go. So if we go back to our face tune layer, we need to use the smudge tool again to get that color out of there. And whilst we're at it, we can actually use the dodge tool to make them a little bit lighter, because you can see they're a bit yellowish at the moment. So we're going to use the dodge tool to lighten up them a little bit, and then we're going to layer in some white all over the top. So go back to your color selector tool, press X to switch to white. Go to your brush tool, add some white here, like so. Obviously it's a little bit too white, so we're going to change the layer mode to overlay. Okay, let's show screen instead, and then turning the brightness down a little bit. 25% seems fine for what we need, and then we're just going to get rid of the rough edges around the iris and outside of the eye. We can do the same obviously for the other side. Those are the eyelashes done on one side, and I'm just going to do the other side very quickly. Alright, with the eyelashes pretty much done, and now we just need to work on the iris color. So we're going to source the color with the eyedropper tool. Let's pick this one. I believe these are meant to be blue eyes, not green. It's just the way the lighting is at the moment. We'll fix that later. So grab that color, just pull this into view. Here we go. And we're just going to make them a teal-ish color, make it much lighter. And we're going to make a new layer for that. Make the brush size as big as the iris. So about there. Just fill that in like that. And another one here. Just get rid of the edges here, over the hair. And then we can use overlay, could do the job, to be honest. It's just a bit too vibrant at the moment, so we're just going to turn the opacity down a little bit and set it to 25%. That should be good enough. It just makes her eyes pop a little bit more. Now obviously we can change the color a little bit if it doesn't fit our needs. So if you just right click, go into blending modes, scroll down to color overlay, and then you can change the color here. So if it's a bit too greenish, you can make it a bit more blue, and then obviously play around with the opacity in here as well, make them a little bit more blue, so like that. We're going to apply the layer style using rasterize, gets rid of that option, no, sets everything back to normal for the layer, so we need to go back to overlay. So that's what it was before, that's what it's after. Just adds a little bit more color to the eyes. So this is our eyelashes layer, then this is our eye touch-up layer, and we can merge all of these down to Facetune like that. So, with the face done, we're going to focus onto the rest of her body now, mostly the neck area and the breasts. We'll start off with the breasts as they'll pretty much set the starting point for the rest of the body. So if we go to filter, liquify, I'm going to go to the bullet tool here, B if you want to use a shortcut, and just zoom in a little bit on her chest area. Now you want to choose a good brush size, just slightly bigger than her current size of the breasts, and go over with the bullet tool. Now you don't want to just like click and hold like that, otherwise the image will explode too much. You want to click in slightly different areas around her breasts, like so, kind of a circular motion, and just enlarge them a little bit, and do the other side as well. You want to get the two breasts roughly the same size as well. Make sure you do the breasts so they go out over the arms slightly, like so. Now we don't want to explode or make them too large, considering the top that she has on right now, which is a cheetah print. But as you can see, when we do actually bloat out her breasts a little bit, the pattern on the t-shirt deforms, which we'll fix up in a moment. So that's the breast pretty much done. Let's save that to see the difference. So this is the before and this is the after. Whilst it's not that bad of a change, we still want to fix up this a lot more than what it is currently. So we're going to focus on the pattern because it's a major flaw here. As you can see, fairly sharp and everything until we bloat out the breasts a little bit. So we're going to go back to filter, liquify. We're going to use the warp tool here a little bit, not only for the cheetah print to fix it up a little bit, but also the breasts themselves to squeeze them together. So actually, let's go ahead and do that first before we start on the cheetah print. So we're going to just make a very big change here by using a large brush size and just putting these breasts together so they're a lot more closer in. And then once we do this, obviously the breasts go away from the arms, which we need to fix up as well. So like this, essentially. So if we press OK, there we go. So you can see the difference in her breasts right now. After using a couple of these tools, you can see the difference in the cheetah print on the top, which we're going to have to fix again. So we're going to go back to liquify and use the forward warp tool once more. Just going to fix up the pattern. So we're going to drag some of the pattern down from around where it's squeezed together, where it's not as stretched as it is where we bloated it out. So after roughly fixing the cheetah print on the breast here, we're going to focus on the curvature of the shirt a little bit, because at the moment it's a little bit too curved. So we're just going to use the forward warp tool once again, pull it down a little bit so it's less curved around it. So we're going to hit OK, save all those changes, and you can see a big difference now. Quality is a little bit better. Doesn't look bloated, doesn't look too fake, but it's still blurry, as you can see, in comparison to the other cheetah print below where we didn't edit anything. So we're going to use the sharpen tool to go around here and just really touch up this pattern here, just to sharpen it up a little bit, make it less blurry. Now, with using the sharpen tool, it also overexposes the breasts a little bit in terms of color. So what we're going to do is go over to the burn and dodge tools and work with that a little bit. So we're going to use the burn tool at first, make it a little bit darker here to get rid of that exposure that we added in the first place. There we go. And now we're going to work on the actual breast shading. So since we made it larger, we need to add a bit more definition to help it make sense, essentially. The larger the breasts, obviously the larger the shadow that will be created by it. So we're just going to start at the top of her breast here, just go around, drag it down like so. And then we're going to do the same but for her top now. So obviously we drew over this area, but now we just need to focus a little bit on the underneath the breast, so it kind of just like pops out a little bit more. So we're going to darken the rest of her shirt like this, essentially. It's a little bit too much, so we're going to undo that. In fact, gonna make it less exposed, I'd say. Go down to 10%. Just go underneath her breasts, following that curve, and then the rest of her shirt can be slightly burned in a little bit. But if we go into the before and after, you can see that her breasts pop out a little bit more natural as well. That is almost done. Now we just need to do the highlights using the dodge tool. So if we use the dodge tool, make the brush size a little bit bigger, just go over the top of her breast like here. That's a bit too much, so we can undo that. Make a bigger brush size and just do this like that. And then smaller again, go around like that. Whilst we're at the point of shading in the character a little bit using dodge and burn tools, we're going to do the rest of her body as well. That's exposed, all the skin. So where it's obviously highlighted, you want to just like touch it up a little bit to give it a little bit more definition, give it a bit more contrast. And then using the burn tool, we're going to do the opposite of what we did with the dodge tool. So go into the crevices and the darker spots and just darken those areas out a little bit. This tones her body up a little bit. I'm going to touch up her neck, not too much though. Don't like this portion of the skin here, so we're going to use the smudge tool, fix that up a little bit. So that's the after, this is the before. I definitely overdid it on the arms a little bit with the dodge tool to make it brighter, so you got to watch out with that. Now I'm going to add one more thing, and that's going to be fabric manipulation. So I don't like the strap being here. I kind of want to let it loose and go over the shoulder to the right. Let's make a new layer for that. Just call it strap. That's good enough. Simply copy and paste this to the other side like this. Onto a separate layer actually, so copy, paste, there we go. Flip it to the side a little bit. Just go ahead and save that. Get rid of this skin, essentially, around the strap. And then that should be good enough. So that's our strap right here. Now we're going to have to position it where the strap would be attaching to. That would be a good position for the strap. It's just that we need to manipulate the top of the top to make it work. We need to fix up the strap a little bit so that it goes over to where we need it to be. So we're just going to use the brush tool and paint in the rest like this. And we can remove some here, some excess. Before we attach this portion of the fabric to the strap that we just added, we need to get rid of this strap, so the smudge tool will come in handy once again. We can just hide this for the time being and just smudge in the two sides of the skin like so, essentially. There we go, so that's the strap removed. We're just going to fix up the colors a little bit here. Then we can go back to the blur tool as well. And then using the sharpen tool to give it that noise back a little bit. Don't really like this dark spot here, so just gonna get the brighter colors in a little bit. We can of course also use the brush tool, select this color for example, lower the opacity a little bit and layer that in. And then using the noise tool once again and the blur tool, just use the blur tool to smooth out the color. Not the noise tool, but the sharpen tool. So that's the strap removed. Then there's our new strap position. And what we need to do now is get rid of the rest of this strap here. So using the liquefy tool once again, using the forward warp tool. So that's the strap finned here. Now we just need to adjust the actual fabric like so to roughly meet our strap where it is. Should be somewhere around here, almost there. We can just quickly adjust the strap a little bit, remove the side. So it goes over the skin a little bit, so it gives it a little bit more thickness, but not too much like it did there before we used the eraser tool. So we're almost there, we're almost meeting it. We just need to drag it back down a little bit and then loosen this portion of the strap a little bit, or the top. So let's pull this down and loosen it up a little bit. There we go. So that's that strap pretty much done. We just need to remove the excess that goes over the top of the print and get rid of this skin portion from the strap. Here we go. That's that strap done essentially. And that's how you go from having the strap on there, top of the shoulder, and then onto the side of the shoulder instead. So you can see the huge difference. Now, I'm not really liking how I did the arms, so what I'm going to do is just get the original. This is why you saved the original in the first place. And this is our current setup, and then I just want to overlay the arms a little bit over the top of what we've got here. So we're going to select that copied layer and add a mask to it using this button down here. So if we go to that, using Alt and left click on it, or you can swap between the actual what you can see and the mask itself. You can use black and white to paint in this area using 100% opacity, of course, 0 smoothing. So if we see, there you go, you can see the difference where we painted. So if you don't have to necessarily use this mask editing where you see the actual mask, you can just go straight to the layer like this with the Alt and left click onto the mask and then just paint it over like that. So we're just going to get rid of this area here and just leave the white where the arms are essentially. Alright, so once you've got what you wanted to return back to the photo, you can merge these two. And now we just need to fix up the colors a little bit, so blur them in, smudge them in. There we go. So we got back the arms that we wanted to work on again. So let's go over to the burn and dodge tool. Use a little bit less exposure on the burn, I guess. Just give it a little bit of depth, not too much obviously. And we can do the same underneath the strap, in fact. So we've got the strap here. Just want to burn just underneath it a little bit, so that it's kind of like causing its own shadow, or creating its own shadow. Alright, so that is pretty much the skin done and her body. Now we just need to focus on the actual color grading of this image. So I don't like the way the background is almost the same color as her skin. So we need to essentially give it a little bit more contrast in between the two. So what we're going to do is just make a new layer. Let's call it contrast. And what we're going to do is use the magic wand tool. In fact, no, the quick selection tool. No, I'm just going to paint it in, all in, like that. So we've got everything selected, and then deselect her using Alt and left click, instead of just left click to mark what we wanted to select. Make sure to click a couple of times, let go of the left mouse button so you can undo if you went over the top a little bit too much. Just gives you that quick and easy turn point, just in case you mess something up. You don't have to be necessarily too perfect with this selection. You just want to roughly get her outline. Let's get the spots in between as well, in between her arms. There we go. So that's the cutout essentially selected. Just let me touch this up a little bit. There we go. It's good enough for what we need. So that's the character outline selected. Now what we want to do is contract the selection. So once you press contract, this box will pop up, and we just want to contract it by 10 pixels, should be good enough, and it gives us a little bit of spacing in between the character and the scene, like so, and then we just want to go over the sides like that to add in for contraction around the edges like that. So you just want to create this like almost bubble essentially from around the selection and the character. That should be good enough for what we need. And now what we're going to do is soften this selection. So we're going to right click and press on feather. Now this box will pop up over here, and we've got a feather radius, which means how quickly does it transition from one side to the other of what is actually selected, which you'll see in just a second. So we're going to do 20, so you can see it's smoothed out our selection to make it a little bit more circular and feathered. So if we do, for example, like paint something, you can see it feathers out, just fades in and fades out of the actual thing of what you got selected and what you don't. And this is great for color grading the background and not the character, which is what we're doing right now. So with our selection that is feathered, we go up to image adjustments and photo filter. You're gonna have this box that comes up, and we're just gonna put it over her tits. And we're gonna use a cooling filter to make the background the opposite color essentially of what the color her skin is. So orange is the opposite of blue essentially, and since she is very orange in color, you want to make the background blue to make that contrast between the two. So we're just going to see which one's best out of them all. Really like this LBB cooling filter here. And you can change the density to see how much of a change it actually does. 30%, that should be good enough. If we deselect everything, you can see it very nicely made the transition from the cool background to the orange character in front here. We just need to also get rid of some of the greens from her, because if you zoom in really closely, there are a little bit of greens. You might see it a bit differently on your screen, but the character for me is a little bit greenish. So we're just gonna get rid of some of that using some effects. So using the effects menu, we're going to do the channel mixer. So we're going to change the output channel to green, turn the green down, so you can see this removes pretty much all the greens, and then this adds more greens to it. 90, that was like a little bit too much, should be a lot better. So that's mixing in that. We can merge those layers, and now if we go back between the two, you can see the massive difference in the scene and the character. How this is very green, yellow, orangish, and then you've got this which gives it that sunset feel. And that's pretty much all that there is to photo editing and GTA 5 characters, I'd say. If you have any more ideas of anything you would like to see with photo editing, how you can improve on your own edits, don't be afraid to put a comment down below the video and let me know. But thank you for watching. This is going to be the final comparison between the two images.